Welcome to Anderson Alchemy. I'm your host, Brandy Anderson. This is a space for inner work, shadow work, and transformation, where we move beyond surface understanding and begin to engage the deeper layers of the psyche, the symbolic, the unconscious, the unseen forces shaping who we are becoming. This is the work of inner alchemy. Hello, everyone. Today, I want to talk about a concept that has fundamentally changed how I understand personal growth, how I understand spirituality, the purpose of life, or even just everyday challenges we all face. It's a concept developed by Carl Jung called individuation. And don't let the fancy psychological term scare you off. Individuation is actually something you probably experienced, even if you've never heard the word before. And at its simplest, individuation is the process of becoming who you truly are, not who your parents expected you to be, and not who culture conditioned you to be, or not who you learned you needed to become in order to be accepted or to be loved or to feel safe, but who you actually are beneath all of that. We all spend the first half of our lives building an identity. We learn what gets rewarded, what gets rejected, what makes us belong, and what makes us stand out. And we develop roles and masks and ways of navigating the world that help us avoid rejection and experience acceptance. And our authentic self just gets pushed down and rejected, leaving us disconnected from ourselves. We may be successful and accomplished on the surface, but underneath, there's this lack of coherence, a perpetual unease or anxiety that keeps us striving and continually reaching for distractions. And then at some point, life starts to ask deeper questions. Like, why do I keep repeating these same patterns? Or why do I feel disconnected from myself? Why do I feel stuck? Why do I have this sense that there's more to life that I'm just not experiencing? And those questions are often the beginning of the individuation journey. What's fascinating is that this journey isn't just a psychological theory, it's everywhere. It's woven into myths and fairy tales, religious stories, and ancient wisdom traditions. It's the hero's journey that Joseph Campbell spoke of. It's the descent into the underworld. It's death and rebirth. It's the story of leaving behind an old identity and discovering something deeper and more authentic. And what's even more fascinating is that the same blueprint shows up in symbolic systems like tarot and astrology and Dreamwork. And these tools have been instrumental in my own inner work. I had a spiritual awakening in 2014 that sent me on a journey of self-discovery. Basically, after a season of unrelenting depression, I had an experience that awakened me to the power of the divine flow in my life. And I spent years after that experience plugged into the Christian church, desperately in search of a truth that could set me free. The theology I was handed did very little to affect real transformation. The prevailing focus on being saved, whatever that really means, and going to heaven when we die, actually prevented genuine salvation, which is to say liberation, from the conditioned patterns that kept me from my authentic self. And the more theology I metabolized, the more disconnected I felt. I finally came to the end of the religious road and discovered that true salvation isn't about going to heaven when we die. It's about a conscious journey into wholeness. And the modalities that the church demonizes are the most beneficial tools for navigating this journey into authenticity and abiding peace. The most powerful tools in my own inner work have been dreams, tarot, and astrology, not because they told me the future and not because they gave me magical answers, but because they helped me to see things that I couldn't see on my own about myself and the energies impacting the flow of my life. Because here's the truth. We can't know what we don't know. We all have blind spots. We all have unconscious patterns. We all have aspects of ourselves that remain hidden from our awareness. And that's why we need these mirrors. Dreams, tarot, and astrology can function as symbolic mirrors that help illuminate what's operating beneath the surface. They help us to see where we're stuck, what we're avoiding, what wants to emerge, and what life may be asking of us next. So today I want to explore this idea of individuation, what it is, why it matters, and how it shows up in myth and symbolism, and why these tools can become powerful companions on the journey of becoming fully ourselves. According to Carl Jung, individuation is the lifelong process of psychological integration. It's the journey of becoming your truest, most authentic self by making the unconscious conscious and unifying the differing, often opposing parts of your psyche. Jung viewed this process as the ultimate task of human life. Instead of merely conforming to societal expectations or following the herd, individuation brings us into the truest expression of ourselves, where abiding peace and balance are finally realized. Individuation isn't self improvement, it's the process of becoming fully yourself. It's realizing the fullest expression of who you were created to be. It's not about becoming perfect or achieving an elevated state of existence. It's not moralistic. This is where the church actually prevented me from coming into alignment. Mainstream theology kept me from experiencing a sense of ease and abiding peace because the prevailing message was centered around morality and outward behaviors. This only serves to create more anxiety and disconnection from ourselves. Jung's model of individuation is liberating because it guides us back down into our humanity, making us more conscious of who we actually are. It leads toward truth, into authenticity, and not away from it. It's the process of becoming who you truly are instead of who you have been conditioned to be. Most people fail to individuate because the conditioning is just so pervasive. We inherit expectations and beliefs from our family of origin. We absorb religious beliefs and cultural values. We create personas to gain acceptance, and we suppress aspects of ourselves that seem unacceptable. And many of us are coming from families that were simply oblivious to the process of individuation. They were too caught in the grip of societal, cultural, or religious conditioning. Our parents couldn't impart what they themselves never realized. Feeling a sense of spiritual longing, many of us turn to religion, hoping for some relief from the unrelenting existential angst. But there again, the religious system brings its own brand of conditioning, often adding more pressure to conform and behave in a particular way. Deep down, we sense there's something more, but we feel adrift in the world, unsure of where to turn. Sadly, many people stay within the confines of a familiar system, clinging to theological concepts, afraid to venture into the unknown. The hero's journey, the path of individuation, requires courage to separate from the herd and risk alienation that often comes with self-discovery. For me, the decision to take that plunge wasn't really a decision at all. Life pulled the rug out from under me. I had to come to the end of my metaphorical rope, which at the time felt awful. But now I'm grateful for the push in the right direction. If we refuse the invitation to follow the path of our destiny, resisting and distracting from the symptoms that would lead us back to ourselves, we will finally reach a breaking point where the invitation morphs into a divine shove, so to speak. I'm pretty stubborn, so the shove was much needed, but all of life is designed to awaken us. So it's a much smoother process if we learn to see our symptoms as signs pointing us toward healing and wholeness. Rather than distracting and numbing ourselves, grasping at anything to alleviate the symptoms, we must learn to mine out the healing that's available within them. Shadow work has become a buzzword, but it's important to have the proper understanding of the shadow if we expect to actually do our shadow work, which is to say, individuate. To explain the shadow, we need to first understand the persona, the counterpart of the shadow. The persona is the mask we show to the world. It's how we want to be seen in the world. It's the favorable qualities that we want to be known for, the things that make us acceptable, popular, and thought well of. The shadow is everything that we do not want to be seen as. It's important to understand, though, that the shadow isn't bad or evil. It's just unconscious. It contains all of the qualities we've rejected in the name of staying safe and accepted in the world. The shadow contains both positive and negative aspects of ourselves, so it's not just everything bad as is often thought. We repress some of our very best qualities also, which is what Robert Johnson refers to as the gold in our shadow. If our outspokenness causes us to be punished as a kid, we may have repressed that trait in the name of being considered good. If our creativity was labeled frivolous because our parents elevated more serious career paths, we may have relegated our creative spark to the shadow realms and presented as a more serious scholarly type. The people pleaser may have buried healthy anger. The caretaker may have buried ambition. The intellectual may have buried emotion. Our authentic selves become buried in the shadow, which is why shadow work is so important. And it's not about ridding ourselves of undesirable traits. This is sadly what the church often peddles, and it's the very thing that keeps us stuck. It's about welcoming back into the light all of the aspects of ourselves that we have rejected. It's about seeing with clarity all the ways we have bent ourselves in knots to satisfy others, gain acceptance, or feel loved. This is the hero's journey. We become split into a persona and a shadow, into a conscious self and an unconscious self. And then we strike out into the world attempting to achieve and prosper. But it's a futile endeavor. We'll never find ultimate satisfaction as long as we are divided. We must enter the underworld and face our shadow and learn to hold the tension of opposites within ourselves if we are to experience wholeness. The hero's journey, or what is also called the monomyth, is a universal storytelling structure popularized by mythologist Joseph Campbell. It follows a protagonist who leaves their everyday life, undergoes transformative trials in a mystical world, and then returns home forever changed, bringing help and healing to their community. There are 12 distinct steps outlined within the hero's journey. But essentially, it begins with the protagonist or hero in the ordinary world, in everyday life. Then the hero is faced with a challenge that disrupts their normal routine. Fearing the unknown, the hero initially hesitates or tries to refuse the adventure. But then a guide appears to give the hero advice or training or magical items to help them on their quest. And finally, the hero commits to the journey and steps out into the unfamiliar. The hero then has to learn to navigate this new world, to make new friends and face new enemies. They must face their inner doubts and draw on inner resources, and ultimately face their ultimate fear, confront a major villain, or experience a brush with death. Having survived the ordeal, the hero claims the prize, maybe an object, maybe secret knowledge, or newfound wisdom. Then the hero must return to the ordinary world with the elixir, the wisdom and the insight that others need. The hero's journey is everyone's journey. It's baked into every myth, every fairy tale, every screenplay. The monsters and villains are symbolic shadow material. The treasure is hidden within what was feared. The journey is psychological, not geographical. It's the story of Inanna descending into the underworld, or Persephone entering and returning from the underworld. It's the story of the Buddha leaving the palace in search of enlightenment. The myth is crystallized in Christ's death and resurrection. The same pattern is found everywhere: the death of an old identity and the birth of a more authentic self. Humanity has been telling the story of individuation for thousands of years because it is the story of becoming human. The hero's journey is also reflected in our dreams, in the tarot, and in astrology. During my time studying at the Hayden Institute, I was introduced to Dreamwork and the tarot, and it really enhanced my inner work and helped bring a lot of clarity and perspective in my journey. Depth psychology and Eastern spirituality had taken me a long way, but I still felt stuck in a lot of ways that I couldn't articulate at the time. I understood the shadow, and I found mindfulness and meditation beneficial in bringing some of my conditioned patterns into the light. But like I said earlier, you don't know what you don't know. And the shadow is unknown to us, which is one of the reasons shadow work is so difficult. When I learned to pay attention to my dreams in a Jungian way and engage the archetypal images of the tarot, I was finally able to access insights into the deeper currents of my psyche. And that's when things really started to shift. Symbols are the language of the soul, the language of the divine, and the tarot and dreams are speaking that language proficiently. If you're unfamiliar with tarot, it helps to think of it as two different layers of experience. The minor arcana is made up of 56 cards divided into 4 suits: the cups, the pentacles, the swords, and the wands. These cards tend to reflect the rhythms of our ordinary life, our relationships, our emotions, our work, the everyday experiences that make up our lives. Then the major arcana, on the other hand, consists of 22 cards that represent the universal archetypes and transformative stages of human development. These are the big moments that fundamentally change us: the moment of great loss or failure, the seasons of awakening, the defining moment of temptation, the pivotal moments that ultimately determine our lives. And in depth psychology, archetypes are universal patterns that exist within the collective unconscious. They are recurring psychological forces that appear across cultures, religions, myths, and stories. And they exist in all of us. And that's why the figures in the major arcana feel so familiar: the fool, the hermit, the magician, the empress. They're not just random images on cardstock. They're symbolic representations of experiences every human being encounters in one form or another. And what's remarkable is that if you lay out the major arcana from the beginning to the end, they tell the story of the hero's journey. The journey begins with the fool standing at the edge of a cliff, stepping into the unknown with openness and possibility. And as the fool travels, he encounters teachers, authority figures, love, and sacrifice. He experiences triumph and loss. He meets temptation. He experiences collapse and comes through the other side with hope as he is ultimately individuated, perfectly balanced and reconciled. There are moments when old identities must die, represented by the death card. There are encounters with our own shadow, represented in the devil archetype. There are times when the structures we built collapse around us in the tower. There are moments of healing and renewed faith in the star. And eventually, after all the trials, the journey culminates in the world card, a symbol of integration, completion, and wholeness. The beauty of the major arcana is that it's describing everyone's inner journey. It's a symbolic map of individuation itself, the lifelong process of becoming who we truly are. And when we begin to see the major arcana through that lens, the tarot becomes much more than a deck of cards. It becomes a mirror reflecting the deeper movements of the psyche and the universal path of human becoming. And I've been working with the tarot for years now, and I can say honestly that it has become one of the most valuable tools in my own journey and self-discovery. For those who might be thinking tarot is fortune telling, or maybe if you come from a Christian background, you think it's a tool of the devil, I want to briefly speak into this. First of all, I want to say that I believe the future is fluid, so it's impossible to predict the future, even if we wanted to. I believe we have free will and our choices affect outcomes. Using tarot to tell the future is simply short-sighted and a misuse of the tool. As for it being divination and therefore a tool of the devil, I want to note that throughout the Bible, God speaks to his people through divination. Casting lots is an example. Proverbs says that the lot is cast into the lap, but the Lord determines the outcome. The ephod worn by the high priest is a divination tool. Joseph used a silver divining cup. The Urim and Thummim were used for divining. Divination is simply inquiring of the divine. We all do that when we pray for God to send us a sign, or when people open the Bible to a random page and point, expecting to land on the exact verse that they need in the moment. The issue isn't divination in and of itself. It's the misuse of divination, attempting to control or manipulate others, to force outcomes that bring us increase at the expense of others. The tarot, when used as a reflection tool, is a beautiful and precise way to tap into divine wisdom for our highest and best good. When used in this way, we are surrendering to the flow of life and not attempting to control it. The tarot has helped me time and time again to see what I couldn't otherwise see. There have been so many moments when I felt stuck, confused, or discouraged, uncertain about what was unfolding in my life. And I'd sit down with the cards, and what emerged wasn't some magical prediction, it was clarity. The cards would reveal the underlying pattern that I was living out. They would point to the fear that I hadn't acknowledged, or the belief that was quietly shaping my decisions, or the part of myself that I was resisting, or the new part of me that was trying to emerge. And at times I wouldn't fully understand the reading in the moment. And maybe it was only weeks or months later, looking back, that I'd realized just how precisely the cards had described the psychological process that I was moving through at the time. That's why I don't primarily think of tarot as a fortune-telling device. I think of it as a symbolic language, a conversation with the unconscious. The cards don't create the process, they illuminate it. They bring into awareness what was already happening beneath the surface of consciousness. And for me, tarot isn't about asking what's going to happen. It's about asking, what am I not seeing? What is trying to emerge? What wants my attention right now? And that's a very different way of approaching the cards. Instead of looking outside myself for certainty, tarot continually invites me back into a deeper relationship with myself. It has become a mirror, one that reflects not just who I am, but where my own psyche is inviting me to grow next. Tarot is simply one symbolic language that has helped me. There are many mirrors that can lead us toward greater self-awareness. If this isn't one you feel called to use, that's completely okay. My intention isn't to prescribe a path. It's simply to share one that has been meaningful for me. But if you're interested in exploring tarot for yourself, I'd encourage you to start with the classic Rider-Waite-Smith deck. It's the deck I learned on. It's the foundation of most modern tarot, and almost every book, teacher, and resource references its symbolism. And if you learn this language first, you'll have a solid foundation for understanding almost any tarot deck you encounter. And I'll link this deck in the show notes below. But a great way to start using tarot and familiarize yourself with the cards is just to draw one card as a daily reflection. You can look in the guidebook that comes with the deck to get an idea of what the card means or keywords associated with that card. And also, there are plenty of online resources to delve into meanings. But I recommend not getting focused on memorizing a particular meaning, but instead sit with the card and let it speak to you. The images are archetypal and they carry a lot of nuance, so just engage the image and reflect. Over time, you'll become more and more familiar with the archetypes, and in time, may shift into doing more focused draws. A 3-card draw that I like to do periodically is to ask, like, what do I need to stop doing, start doing, and continue doing? There are a lot of spreads you can do, some pretty simple, like the 3-card draw, and some more complex, like the Celtic cross. Or if I have a dream symbol that I don't really understand or feel like it's communicating something I might be missing, I'll often draw cards asking for clarification around that symbol. It's also helpful to keep a journal of your draws and reflections as you go along. As an example, I recently had a dream where I was packing my things to move, and there was a bed of hot ashes in the house that couldn't be left unattended. And when I shoveled some of the ashes to check if it was still hot, it flamed back up. There were hot coals under the ashes that could be dangerous. So I couldn't move until I took care of this fire hazard. As I sat with the dream, it felt as if the ashes were about something having been mostly incinerated, but the hot coals hidden underneath that flamed up when I disturbed things pointed to a remnant of some aspect of my psyche that wouldn't let me move forward. Something keeping me stuck, some belief or fear or cycle of relating was mostly incinerated, but there were remnants that needed my attention still if I wanted to move forward in my journey. There were other clues in the dream, but this dream was really just a fragment. I couldn't remember the entire dream. So I wasn't sure precisely what needed my attention, what hot coal was lingering under the surface. So I drew a card and I asked, what is the hot coal? What is keeping me from moving forward? I drew the 8 of Swords, which represents self-imposed limitations and mental traps. It often serves as a warning that you're allowing fear or anxiety to blind you to your options. Like, it's about feeling stuck in circumstances you actually have the power to change. So I asked, what limiting belief or fear is it exactly? And I drew another card. I drew the 5 of Pentacles, which is about scarcity mindset, feeling a lack of support. And as a 5 on the Enneagram, this really strikes at the core issue. Instead of seeing all of the abundant opportunities, my inclination is to withdraw and focus on what's missing. So the cards help me clarify the message of the dream and also help me to be more mindful of limiting beliefs that were holding me back at that time. But in addition to tarot, Dreamwork has also been an extremely helpful tool for me as I have navigated the individuation process. Like the example above, I often use the 2 modalities together, but they function well separately as well. They're just complementary methods of getting in touch with the unconscious. Dreams speak the language of archetypal symbols, same as tarot, which is to say, dreams are the language of God. As Jeremy Taylor said, all dreams come in the service of health and wholeness. Dreams arrive to tell us something that we're not aware of, but that we need to be. And Jung noted that dreams compensate for our blind spots. They're pointing to something that we aren't consciously able to see. They reveal imbalances in our waking life. They show us what's being neglected. They illuminate shadow material. It's the psyche's way of trying to help us become whole. If you're interested in working with your dreams, I encourage you to start by keeping a dream journal. Keep the journal by your bed, and when you first wake up, just lie still with your eyes closed for a few minutes to try and remember any dream material still lingering, and then write it down immediately before doing anything else. Dreams are elusive and they'll dissolve quickly, so it's important to jot them down as soon as you remember them. You can work with your dreams alone by simply sitting with the dream symbols and noticing or even journaling what comes up for you. You might even re-enter the dream in an imaginative way and use what Jung called active imagination to dialogue with the dream characters. Just note any feelings or impressions. It's not about interpreting the dream so much as it's about entering into a dialogue with the dream maker. It's not a problem to solve, it's a relationship to cultivate. And for anyone interested, I host a monthly dream group gathering for my paid Substack subscribers. We meet the last Tuesday of every month from 6 to 8 p.m. Central on Zoom and usually have time to work 2 dreams collectively and discuss dream images and archetypes. Group dream work is helpful because it offers the dynamic of multiple perspectives. It can be difficult to understand our own dreams because it's mostly unconscious material. So having others to help us reflect on dream material can be very enlightening. If that sounds like something that you're interested in, just click the link below in the show notes and we would love to have you join us. Another tool that has recently become super helpful for me in the individuation journey is astrology. Now, it's a pretty complex modality, so it's a lot to learn to really utilize it fully. And I'm definitely still in the learning process, but it's becoming such a helpful tool for me the more I learn and engage with it. So I wanted to mention it here. I always thought of astrology as horoscopes, which always felt super general and not really accurate, in my opinion. But that isn't what astrology really is. We're so much more than our sun sign, the sign every horoscope is based on. In fact, our sun sign is a representation of the traits we're here to learn to embody. It's who we are becoming, so to speak. Our rising sign is how we show up in the world. It's how we're perceived by others, and it's a better picture of who we are on the surface. And our moon sign represents our emotional life, how we process things emotionally, the more internal landscape. The natal chart or birth chart contains all of these and much more, and it's a symbolic blueprint of our becoming. Birth charts show us where we are coming from, karmically speaking, and where life is inviting us to grow. It shows us our gifts, our core wounds, our psychic blocks, our shadow material, the things we must integrate in order to fulfill our destiny. It's a blueprint of individuation. At its simplest, astrology is made up of 3 basic components: the planets, the signs, and the houses. The actor analogy is one of the best ways to explain astrology because it's simple and memorable. The planets are the actors, the signs are the roles or the costumes they're playing, and the houses are the stage or the setting where the action takes place. For example, imagine you're watching a movie. Mars is one of the actors. Mars always represents action and drive and courage and assertion. If Mars is in Aries, it's playing the role of the fearless warrior, bold, direct, impulsive. If Mars is in Cancer, it's the same actor, but now it's playing the role of the protector, motivated by emotional security and care for loved ones. The actor hasn't changed, but the role has. And now let's say that Mars is in the 10th house. The stage is career, vocation, public life. So that Mars energy is likely to express itself through work and leadership, through ambition. If instead Mars is in the 4th house, the same actor is now performing on the stage of home and family and one's inner emotional foundation. Every person has all the signs and planets in their chart, but the particular configuration is what makes each chart unique for each person. Now, each of the planets carries archetypal energy and correlates with the chakras. For example, the sun represents our essential identity, our vitality, and the person that we're becoming. The moon symbolizes our emotional world, our instincts, what helps us feel safe. Mercury reflects how we think, how we learn and communicate. Venus speaks to love and relationships, beauty, and values. Mars represents our drive, our courage, and how we pursue what we want. Jupiter symbolizes growth and meaning and wisdom. Saturn is the archetype of structure and responsibility and discipline, and it's the lessons that mature us. This planet is often most associated with restriction. And Uranus represents awakening, liberation, and change. Neptune points toward imagination, spirituality, and the longing for something beyond the ordinary, something transcendent. And Pluto is the god of the underworld, the force of deep transformation, death, and rebirth. It represents the parts of ourselves that must be surrendered so that something new can emerge. And I say all of this not to overwhelm you, but to show you how precise astrology can be as a map of individuation. Astrology isn't woo-woo. It's mathematically precise. And the placements are calculated in mathematical degrees. Every angle and planetary placement is speaking into an archetypal aspect of your soul. And when you learn to pay attention to what it's communicating, it can be a very helpful tool for shadow work and integration. Now, if you aren't interested in learning astrology, or if that seems too overwhelming, you could always use a reputable astrologer to get a natal chart reading and then follow up periodically to look at current transits to get some insight into how to navigate the energies around you at any given time. And I wanted to record this episode really to speak into individuation in an accessible way, to explain what it is, since it's a word tossed around a lot in psycho-spiritual circles. But more than that, I wanted to talk about these tools that make individuation itself more accessible. It's one thing to conceptualize individuation, to understand what it is intellectually, but that does us no good if we're not able to experience it, to actually enter into the individuation process with some level of awareness. We're all on the journey, whether we know it or not, but we suffer a lot more when we are not aware of it. Utilizing tools like Dreamwork and tarot and astrology gives us some clarity into the process. I mean, we still face the trials, we still suffer and struggle, but we do so with a sense of purpose and understanding. And rather than feeling like life is pummeling us for no reason at all, we see the higher purpose. We learn the lessons and grow into our highest potential. And like I already said, but it's worth repeating, tools are like mirrors reflecting back to us what we could not otherwise see in ourselves. We might get dressed and comb our hair and put on our makeup without a mirror, but using a mirror makes it a lot faster and a lot easier. The hero's journey of individuation is not linear, it's a spiral. We're not moving in a straight line of ordered steps. Life is messy and cyclical. We continue to circle back to the same lessons repeatedly as we evolve along. We like to think of growth as a positive endeavor, but in reality, it's mostly painful and confusing. And I often have clients lament that they just don't know what to do next, or, they don't know how to get unstuck. They know something is blocking their unfolding, but they have no clarity about how to proceed. Now, working with a therapist or a spiritual director or a soul companion can be really helpful, and I highly recommend these options. But tarot, dreamwork, and astrology are their own kind of soul companion. They help bring the kind of clarity needed to take the next step. And I want to close out today by saying that the goal of individuation is wholeness, not perfection. Jung said, "I'd rather be whole than good." He knew that trying to be good just leads to repression. It splits us off from ourselves. Wholeness is about integrating every part of ourselves. We have spent our lives rejecting aspects that our family, society, or the church told us were unacceptable, which is why we feel stuck in the first place. We painted ourselves in a corner. Individuation is not about becoming someone new. It's just letting go of everything we ever added and welcoming the parts of ourselves that have been rejected. It's not about becoming someone new. It's about realizing who you have been all along. And if you have enjoyed this episode and would like to support my work, you may consider leaving a review and subscribing wherever you listen to podcasts. If you want to offer additional support, you can become a paid subscriber on Substack and have access to additional reflections, early chapters of my published work, and my monthly dream gathering on Zoom. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Anderson Alchemy. As always, cosmic blessings and peace.